The first thing you notice at Union Central Station in the dead of winter isn't the cold, it's the sound. A deep, cavernous echo from marble floors. The hollow clack of heels and boots. The hiss of steam curling from the underbelly of waiting trains. Somewhere far off, a saxophonist plays a lonely tune. The notes drifting through the vaulted glass, sealing like smoke. It was just another morning for most, but not for Thomas Carter and William Bill Hughes. They stood near Platform 4 side by side, their presence quiet but solid like granite pillars. Thomas leaned lightly on a polished wooden cane, scarred but steady, while Bill kept both hands tucked into the deep pockets of his wool coat. They weren't talking much. They didn't have to. Decades of friendship didn't need constant words. A digital board overhead flickered, "Train 2167. Departure delayed 12 minutes. Bill read it, grunted softly. "Still time," he murmured. Thomas nodded once his gaze fixed beyond the crowd, as if the train wasn't their only destination that day. Around them, travelers bustled past, suitcases, rattling coffee cups, steaming scarves pulled high. Some glanced their way, eyes lingering for a heartbeat too long. Most moved on without a word. It wasn't hostility exactly, but it wasn't warmth either. A look that said, "You don't quite belong here." And then came the sound of heavy boots. Not the hurried stomp of a late passenger, but a measured, deliberate pace. Thomas heard it before he saw the man. Bill noticed the shadow, first long, cutting across the tiled floor toward them. Officer Derek Malone. Broad-shouldered uniform, crisp, his dark jacket zipped to the throat. A holstered pistol at his hip. A badge that caught the light just enough to remind everyone it was there. His eyes scanned the platform, locked on them, and stayed there. Bill exhaled through his nose. "Here we go," he muttered. Thomas didn't answer. He'd learned long ago that sometimes silence drew out a man's true intent, faster than any words. Malone closed the distance, stopping just close enough that the brim of his cap cast a shadow across Thomas's face. "Morning," Malone said. It didn't sound like a greeting. Thomas lifted his eyes slowly, meeting Malone's gaze without flinching. "Morning," he replied, his voice low-measured. Bill gave a polite nod. "Something we can help you with." Officer Malone's gaze flicked from Thomas's cane to Bill's satchel. "You two traveling somewhere?" Bill tilted his head toward the digital board. That's usually what people do at a train station. The corner of Malone's mouth twitched, not in amusement but in irritation. "Got your IDs on you." Thomas's grip tightened slightly on the cane. "Is there a reason for this request?" Malone's tone hardened. "We've had reports about 2 individuals matching your description, loitering, making passengers uncomfortable." Bill let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Matching our description. What description would that be, exactly?" Malone didn't answer right away. His eyes did the talking, scanning from their skin tone to their worn coats. The silence was louder than any words he could have spoken. Around them, a few commuters slowed down, sensing the tension. A woman pulling a suitcase hesitated, glancing between the men and the officer before hurrying on. The distant saxophone had stopped, as if even the musician was listening. Thomas straightened a little, his voice calm but steady. "We've been standing here for 20 minutes, officer. Not bothering anyone. Waiting for our train." "Uh-huh," Malone said, unconvinced. "Mind if I take a look in that bag?" He pointed at Bill's satchel. Bill's eyes narrowed. "Yes, I do mind." Malone took a small step closer, enough that the gleam of his badge was now inches from Bill's face. Cooperation goes a long way. Thomas shifted his stance, his cane tapping once against the marble. It wasn't a threat yet, but it was a sound that carried weight. "You sure you want to go down this road?" Thomas asked quietly. Malone's jaw tightened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Bill said, voice cool, "you're making a scene over." Nothing. A murmur rippled through the small crowd forming nearby. Phones began to appear, first 1, then 3, then half a dozen screens raised discreetly, capturing every second. Malone noticed. His nostrils flared, but he didn't back down. "You're refusing a lawful request," he said. "That can have consequences." "Consequences work both ways," Thomas replied. For the first time, Malone's eyes flickered just for a moment. He opened his mouth to reply, but the sound of an approaching train's horn cut through. The air loud and shrill, as if warning everyone on the platform that something far bigger was about to arrive. The horn faded, replaced by the slow grind of steel wheels easing into the station. But no one was boarding. Not yet. All eyes were fixed on the confrontation at platform 4. A young woman in a red scarf moved a step closer, her phone angled perfectly to capture Malone's face. Beside her, a man in a business suit whispered something to a companion, shaking his head in disbelief. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one last time." Malone said, his voice louder now, clearly, aware the crowd was listening. "Open the bag." Bill's tone was ice. "And I'm going to tell you one last time, no." The officer's hand twitched near his belt, not touching the weapon, but close enough that several people audibly gasped. Thomas noticed his eyes narrowing. He shifted, placing himself slightly between Malone and Bill. "Why don't you explain to everyone here?" Thomas said evenly, "Exactly what we've done to deserve this attention." Malone's lips pressed into a thin line. "You're acting suspicious." Bill gave a short, bitter laugh. "Suspicious? We're two old men waiting for a train." The man in the business suit raised his voice. "Officer, they haven't done anything. I've been here the whole time." Malone shot him a glare sharp enough to cut, but the interruption had cracked the veneer. More voices joined in. "They're just standing there. This is ridiculous. Leave them alone." Phones kept recording. The sound of tapping screens and camera shutters filled the air like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. Malone's nostrils flared. "Step back," he barked at the onlookers. "All of you." But no one moved. If anything, the semicircle tightened. Bill leaned toward Thomas, murmuring just loud enough for Malone to hear. "Feels like this train's about to go off the rails." Thomas allowed the faintest trace of a smile. "Let's see where it stops." The platform PA system crackled suddenly, and a female voice came, through calm but firm. "Officer Malone, please report to the station office immediately." The crowd reacted first, with a ripple of curiosity, then with an almost electric buzz of anticipation. Malone's head turned slightly toward the sound, but he didn't move. His pride had him pinned in place, and Thomas knew this was the moment the tide could turn. From the far end of the platform, a woman in a Navy station manager's coat strode. Toward them, her steps quick and purposeful. She carried a leather-bound clipboard under one arm, her ID badge swinging with each stride. The crowd parted just enough to let her through. "Officer Malone," she called, her voice cutting clean through the winter air. "You need to come with me now." Malone didn't turn fully to face her. "I'm in the middle of something." "No," she said firmly, stopping just short of him. "You're in the middle of harassing two decorated veterans in front of a crowd with cell phones. That's what you're in the middle of." A ripple of surprise ran through the onlookers. Bill arched an eyebrow. Thomas's gaze stayed fixed on Malone. The officer's jaw tightened. "Decorated veterans. How do you?" "Because I served with his unit," the station manager said, pointing to Thomas. "Afghanistan. Kandahar 2003. He saved 6 men in a convoy ambush. One of them was my commanding officer." The crowd erupted in low murmurs, some gasps breaking through. The young woman in the red scarf lowered her phone slightly, her eyes wide. Malone blinked, caught off balance for the first time. I didn't." "And him," she continued, nodding at Bill, "was awarded the Silver Star for actions in Fallujah. You can find their names in the Department of Defense archives. Or you could just ask the mayor. He gave them both keys to the city last year." Someone in the crowd clapped once sharply, then another joined in. Soon scattered applause spread along the platform, not rowdy but deliberate, like a public verdict being read aloud. Bill looked around, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Guess the court of public opinion is in session." Malone's ears flushed crimson. "I was just doing your job." Thomas's voice was soft, but the edge was unmistakable. "Your job is to protect people, not profile them." The station manager stepped closer to Malone. "We can finish this conversation in the office, or you can keep standing here and let every one of these videos go live in the next 60 seconds. For a long moment, the only sound was the hiss of the idling train. Then, without a word, Malone turned sharply and stalked toward the far end of the platform. The applause swelled. Thomas let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of 100 eyes still on them. Bill adjusted his coat collar. "Well," he said, "that was one hell of a boarding call." The station felt different once. Malone was gone. The tension that had hung in the air like static slowly dissipated, replaced by something warmer: respect, curiosity, even quiet admiration. A few passengers approached Thomas and Bill. A middle-aged man in a worn leather jacket shook Thomas's hand firmly. "Thank you for your service and for standing your ground." A teenage boy asked Bill if he could take a picture. Bill chuckled, posed with him, then told the kid to stay in school and make better choices than most of us did at your age. The station manager, whose name tag read S. Harper, walked back to them. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said. "Malone, he's got a history of letting his instincts override his judgment." Thomas gave her a small nod. "History's a tricky thing. Depends on what you learn from it." Harper's expression softened. "Speaking of history, there's a Veterans Hall 2 blocks from here. I think you might like to stop by after your trip. People there would be glad to see you." Bill smiled. "We'll think about it." As they boarded the train, Thomas found a window seat, letting the rhythm of the rails soothe his thoughts. The scene at the platform replayed in his mind, but so did other scenes, older, sharper. A dusty road in Kandahar, the choking smell of burned rubber and cordite, the hum of a Humvee's engine suddenly swallowed by an explosion. He remembered pulling 3 men from the wreckage, one of them screaming in pain, the others too shocked to speak. He remembered the sound of gunfire echoing off the hills, the weight of the rifle in his hands, and the cold clarity that came when you realized you either acted now or you didn't act at all. Bill's memories weren't much gentler. Fallujah, heat like a furnace, walls pockmarked with bullet holes. The day his unit got trapped in a narrow street RPG fire cutting off both ends. He'd led a charge through an alley no one thought was passable, dragging a wounded corporal behind him. The silver star had been pinned on him months later, but the medal never outweighed the faces of those who didn't come back. Back in the present, the train rattled on. Bill glanced at Thomas. "You think Malone learned anything today?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He watched the city slip past the window buildings, giving way to snow-dusted fields. "Maybe," he said finally. "But the people on that platform, they learned something too." Bill nodded slowly, and that might be worth more. The train's horn sounded again, long and low, as if marking the close of one chapter and the start of another. By the time Thomas and Bill's train reached the next city, the incident at Union Central was already out in the world, not in whispers but in headlines. It started with a short clip, 37 seconds, posted by the woman in the red scarf. The video showed Malone demanding to search Bill's bag, the refusal, the tension, and finally the station manager's revelation of who these men truly were. The caption read, "This is how you treat heroes. Union Central. Veterans deserve better." Within an hour, the clip had been shared over 2,000 times. By the next morning, it had passed 1 million views. On the train, Bill's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from his niece, his old army buddies, even a few reporters. He ignored most of them, but one text caught his eye from Sart. Mendez saw the video. "Damn proud of you, old man." Bill smiled faintly, slipping the phone back into his coat. Thomas, on the other hand, didn't check his phone at all. He stared out the window, his mind somewhere between the snow-covered fields and the decades behind him. Fame, viral attention meant little to him. But the idea that strangers were talking about respect, about justice, that was different. That mattered. By evening, the story had hit local news. A calm-voiced anchor read from the teleprompter, 2 African-American veterans were stopped and questioned by Officer Derek Malone at Union Central Station earlier today, in an incident now under internal investigation. Witnesses say the officers' actions were racially motivated. Both men have received high military honors for their service overseas. Clips rolled, the crowd clapping. Harper confronting Malone, Thomas's steady voice telling the officer, "Your job is to protect people, not profile them." On social media, the comments flooded in, "Shame on that cop. We need more people like those men. Imagine serving your country just to be treated like that at home." Meanwhile, back at the station, Malone sat in a small windowless office, his badge on the desk in front of him. Across from him, a pair of internal affairs investigators leafed through printed screenshots of the videos. "Public pressure's building," one of them said flatly. "This won't just go away." Malone's jaw tightened. "They're making it sound worse than it was." "It's on video," the other investigator replied. "It is what it is." In a modest hotel room miles away, Thomas and Bill sat, across from each other at a small round table. Between them, 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Bill leaned back. "So, what happens now?" Thomas shrugged. "We go to the ceremony. We shake hands. We keep living." "And the video let it run its course," Thomas said. "Sometimes the truth doesn't need us to push it. It just needs us to stand still and let people see it." Bill took a slow sip of his coffee, then smiled. "Standing still is one thing we're good at." Outside, snow began to fall, soft, silent, but relentless, just like the story they had become part of. 2 days later, the invitation came. It wasn't from a small local station. It was from one of the biggest national morning shows in the country. The producer's email was polite but urgent. "We'd be honored if you could join us tomorrow to share your story. Millions have seen the video, but they deserve to hear from you directly." Bill read it aloud twice, shaking his head in disbelief. "We've gone viral, Thomas. We're a trending topic." Thomas gave a small grunt. "Never thought that'd be on my resume." The next morning, a black town car pulled up outside their hotel. Inside, the studio cameras hummed softly. Lights bathed the set in a warm glow, and a makeup artist fussed over Bill's collar until he waved her away with a smile. The host, a woman with calm eyes and a steady voice, welcomed them both. "Thomas Carter, William Hughes, first of all, thank you for your service, and thank you for being here." They nodded politely. She began with the obvious. "Millions of Americans have seen the video of your encounter with Officer Malone. Can you tell us what was going through your mind in that moment?" Thomas leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I was thinking about how many times this has happened to people who don't have crowd watching, people who don't have a camera on them. How many of those stories never make it past the station platform?" Bill added, "And how many folks don't live to tell it." The studio fell silent for a beat. The weight of his words was palpable, even through the glass of the control room. The host asked about their service, Kandahar Fallujah, and as they spoke, photos appeared on screen. A younger Thomas in desert fatigues, Bill crouched beside a Humvee, sand whipping through the air. "We fought for the idea that every person deserves dignity," Thomas said. "That's what makes this country worth serving. But dignity doesn't stop at the water's edge when you come home." Bill's voice softened. "It's not just about us. It's about every kid who'll grow up here and wonder if they'll be judged before they even open their mouth. We've got to do better. You should know," she said, "our inbox is flooded. Veterans groups, civil rights organizations. People want to meet you. They want to help." Thomas smiled faintly. "Good. Then maybe all this noise will mean something." That night their phones buzzed non-stop, not with just media requests, but messages from strangers. "My dad served with you in Fallujah. I've been through what you went through, but I never had the courage to speak up. Thank you for showing my son what strength looks like." For the first time in years, Thomas felt the weight of his service not as a burden, but as a bridge. It was a week after the interview when it happened. Thomas and Bill were walking through the city's Veterans Resource Center. They'd been invited to speak at a small community event. Nothing flashy, just a gathering of former service members and local supporters. The building's main hall smelled faintly of coffee and old wood polish. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, casting long shadows across rows of folding chairs. In the far corner, a bulletin board was covered with flyers for job fair support groups and volunteer drives. Bill was mid-sentence telling Thomas about a young Marine he'd met earlier when the door opened. Behind them, and in walked Derek Malone. He wasn't in uniform this time, just a plain gray jacket, jeans, and a look that was far from the swagger he'd worn at the station. He hesitated at the threshold, scanning the room until his eyes landed on them. Bill's posture stiffened. "You've got to be kidding me." Thomas turned slowly, meeting Malone's gaze. The room seemed to quiet, even though no one else yet understood who had just arrived. Malone took a breath, then walked toward them. "I heard you were speaking here today." he said, his voice lower, stripped of its previous edge. "I wanted to talk." Bill's arms folded across his chest. About what? How to search a bag without probable cause. Malone flinched, but didn't rise to the jab. About that day. And about me getting it wrong. "Why here? Because this is where people come to fix things," Malone said quietly. "And I need to fix something." For the next few minutes, they stood in a Smalls triangle, the hum of conversation and clink of coffee cups filling the space around them. Malone's words came haltingly at first, how he'd acted on assumptions, how the fallout had forced him to examine not just his behavior, but the training and culture that shaped it. "I can't undo what I did," he said, "but I can own it, and I can learn." Bill didn't smile, but his voice softened just enough to be heard over the low murmur of the room. "Then start by listening, really listening." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And for Thomas, that start mattered. When they left the center later that afternoon, snow was falling again, slow and steady. Bill looked up at the sky. "You think he meant it?" Thomas shrugged. "Time will tell. But at least this time, he didn't have his hand on his gun." 2 weeks later, the ripple had become a wave. What started as a single video from Union Central Station had grown into something larger, a movement that lived both online and in real neighborhoods. Veterans halls, churches, youth centers, and even a few police precincts began hosting open forums on racial profiling and respect for service members. The Veterans Resource Center, where Thomas and Bill had met Malone, was now at the heart of it. Flyers for a new event went up across the city. One uniform, many colors a night, of conversation and change, hosted by Thomas Carter and William Hughes. On the night of the event, the hall was packed. Folding chairs lined every inch of the floor space, and latecomers stood shoulder to shoulder along the back wall. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods mixed with the faint tang of winter air every time the doors opened. Thomas stood at the podium, scanning the crowd. He saw faces, young and old veterans in faded caps, students in hoodies, mothers holding babies, police, officers still in uniform. 2 months ago, he began, "Bill and I were just waiting for a train. We didn't know that morning would turn into all this. But the truth is, it's not about us. It's about what it revealed." Bill stepped up beside him. "It revealed that respect shouldn't be conditional. That wearing a uniform once doesn't mean you'll be treated fairly when it's gone. And that bias, silent or loud, can still cut deep." The crowd listened intently as others took the mic. A young black woman shared how she'd been stopped 3 times in the same month for matching a description. A retired police captain admitted the force still had blind spots they needed to fix. An elderly white veteran voice, trembling, spoke about watching his black comrades return from Vietnam only to be denied service in restaurants. By the end of the night, names had been signed to a community pledge, hundreds of them committing to anti-bias training, public accountability, and better support for veterans. As the crowd began to leave, Thomas noticed Malone in the back row. He hadn't spoken, hadn't approached, but he'd stayed through the whole event. Their eyes met briefly. Malone gave the smallest of nods before turning to go. Bill leaned over. "Looks like we've got a regular follower now." Thomas allowed a thin smile. Better that than a shadow. Bill looked at the street lamps glowing against the frost and said, "Feels like we're building something. Here." Thomas adjusted his scarf. One brick at a time, the 2 men walked into the darkness, the sound of their footsteps steady in sync, 2 veterans carrying the weight of both past battles and the one still to come. It was a cold, clear morning when the invitation arrived, in a thick cream-colored envelope, embossed with a golden seal. Inside, the words were formal but unmistakable. "The office of the mayor requests the presence of Thomas Carter and William Hughes at City Hall for a special ceremony honoring their service and contributions to the community." Bill stared at it for a long moment before saying, "Well, guess we're going to City Hall." The ceremony was held in the grand rotunda, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows high above. Marble pillars rose around them, and the air carried that faint scent of polished stone and history. The audience was a mix of veterans, community leaders, reporters, and ordinary citizens who had followed the story from the beginning. At the front row sat S. Harper, the station manager, her posture as straight as the day she'd confronted Malone. When the mayor stepped up to the podium, the room hushed. Today, she began, we honor two men whose courage did not end on the battlefield. Thomas Carter and William Hughes have shown us that bravery is not just about facing enemy fire, it's about standing up for what's right, even in the face of injustice here at home. She spoke of their military service, of the incident at Union Central, and of the community dialogue that followed. As she talked, images appeared on a large screen. Thomas in uniform, Bill leading a convoy, the now famous still frame of the two men standing tall on the train platform. Then came the moment. For their service to our nation and for their continued service to the cause of dignity and equality, the mayor said, I am proud to present Thomas Carter and William Hughes with the city's Medal of Civic Honor. The applause was thunderous as she placed the medals around their necks. Thomas's eyes swept the crowd, pausing briefly when he spotted Malone standing at the back, not in uniform but present. Their gazes met for a moment, and Thomas gave the slightest nod. Bill, meanwhile, spotted the boy who had saluted them weeks ago at the station. He was sitting on his father's shoulders, waving wildly. Bill gave him a crisp salute in return, earning a grin that lit up the boy's whole face. After the ceremony, reporters crowded around, microphones and cameras thrust forward. Thomas kept his words simple. This medal isn't just ours. It belongs to everyone who stood with us on that platform and to everyone who keeps standing up against prejudice wherever they find it. Bill added with a wry smile, and to every veteran who knows the fight doesn't always end when you come home. A month after the ceremony, Union Central Station was just another busy hub again. Trains came and went, announcements echoed over the PA, and crowds moved in their usual rhythm. But for those who had been there that winter morning, the platform held a different weight. It wasn't just a place where people waited for trains anymore. It was the place where two men had quietly changed the conversation. Thomas and Bill still met there from time to time, not out of nostalgia, but because it was halfway between their neighborhoods. On this particular day, snow was falling lightly, coating the rails in white. They stood side by side, paper cups of coffee warming their hands. You realize, Bill said, we're going to be those guys from the station for the rest of our lives. Thomas gave a low chuckle. Could be worse. At least we're not those guys who stayed quiet. Bill's eyes followed a passing train. Think it'll stick. The change, I mean. Thomas took a long breath, watching the vapor curl in the cold air. Change isn't one moment, Bill. It's 100 little ones. That day was just the start. Their story had already found its way into classrooms, police, training sessions, and veterans' workshops. The video still circulated now, accompanied by messages of hope and calls for reform. Community pledges had grown into regular meetings, and one uniform, many colors had become an annual event. Even Malone had joined a veterans outreach program, not as a leader, but as a participant, listening more than speaking. As their train approached, the young boy from the ceremony appeared at the far end of the platform with his father. He spotted them immediately and sprinted forward, the medal Bill had given him glinting in the pale sunlight. You kept it, Bill said with a grin. The boy nodded. I want to be like you guys when I grow up. Thomas crouched to meet his eyes. Then remember, this courage isn't just about fighting. Sometimes it's about standing still and speaking up. The train doors slid open. Thomas and Bill stepped aboard, the boy waving as the train pulled away. Outside, the city blurred into motion, but inside, the two men sat in comfortable silence. The kind of silence earned through battles fought and through the belief that even small victories can leave a lasting mark. Somewhere between the click of the tracks and the hum of the engine, Thomas thought, the fight for dignity never really ends, but sometimes it wins.